Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our town hall. We are so excited that you're here. We're going to start in just a couple of minutes, give everybody a chance to log in. I want to let you know that the chat function goes directly to all the presenters, so you're welcome to use it throughout, send out questions, and we'll do our best to answer them tonight. If you have other questions, you can put them in the chat throughout the whole evening. Again, we will start in a couple of minutes.
For those who have just joined, we're just going to give it another minute or so since we still see the numbers of attendees increasing as folks log on. Thanks so much for your patience.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to let everybody know that the chat function is working and you can post questions throughout the evening and we will do our best to answer them. I'm Hadar Doan. I'm the head of school at HLA. I know many of you. And for those that I haven't met yet, I can't wait to do so. So welcome to our new families. I'm so grateful to be here with you and at this time together where we can share our plans for the reopening so that you can make good choices for your family. We have a lot to share and I know that you have a lot of questions, so we're gonna dive in. But before we do so, I wanna introduce the rest of our panel. We have our assistant heads of school. Kevin Morris Jr. is returning for the second year as the head of school, assistant head of school this year for the middle school. And Daniela Steinberg, who you might know as our former SPED coordinator, is in a new role this year as the K-4 assistant head of school. You'll be hearing from both of them in a little bit. I'm really excited for their leadership. And we also have, a pretty straightforward agenda. So sorry, I lost my place. To help with that, in addition to Kevin and Daniela, we have important members of our Hebrew Public Network. John Rosenberg, our CEO, Emily Fernandez, our Chief Schools Officer, and Jonathan Worley, our Chief Operating Officer. Now I'm going to turn it over to our CEO, John Rosenberg, to get us started. John?
Thank you, Hadar, and good evening, everyone. We hope you're doing well during what we know is an extraordinarily difficult time for our community, for Brooklyn, for the HLA community, and obviously for the whole country. For those of you who are with us on video, you can see up here on this slide our mission statement and the Olam values that you're probably quite familiar with if you're a returning family. What I want to emphasize here is that our organizational and school values around problem solving, communication, being a learning organization and learning from this moment in time and from experts, and using those things to make a difference in the lives of your children have really grounded us. Everything that we're doing right now is focused on finding ways to both meet health and safety requirements so that we can do everything in our power to keep your children, your families, and our staff safe, while also providing necessary educational services so that your children can thrive. If I can have the next slide, please. So one of the things that, that drives us is evidence in the work that we do. And I wanted to share with you some data that will help inform why New York is in the situation that it's in compared to much of the rest of the country, and why, while we're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination, based on the current data, we believe that it is responsible for us to move ahead with the planning that we're doing, which, as you will hear, would involve us offering a hybrid model to families beginning in late September after a fully virtual start for the first couple of weeks of school. A couple of the key health indicators in different communities that experts are looking at in making these decisions are the number of new cases on a daily basis for every 100,000 residents. And you can see, again, if you're with us on video, that in New York, that number's been around 3 people per 100,000 in terms of new cases. And if you compare that with some of the other states that are really struggling, Georgia and California listed here as examples, our rate is really a fraction of what we're seeing in some of those other states. Obviously, New York was hit very hard back in the spring, but currently we're in much better shape than much of the rest of the country. The second key indicator that we're highlighting tonight is what's called the positive test rate. And this means that over the last 7 days or so, and this is updated daily, what percentage of those who are tested come back with a positive test? In New York, it's been about 0.9% lately, which is less than 1%. Again, compared with Georgia, which is close to 12%, California 5%. In New York, Governor Cuomo has said that as long as the 1 week average and a given day's average positive test rate is below 5%, it's okay for schools to reopen in a hybrid learning mode. And you'll hear more about this, but as we indicated in the memo we sent you Monday night, that means with social distancing, with mask wearing, with a whole bunch of other safety protocols that are really critical to being able to maximize health and safety. For us, again, this means that we're going to be targeting a late September return for children to school, a couple of days a week for most kids, where their families will opt in for that particular option. If I can have the next slide, please. So for a recap of some of the key timeline pieces here that are really important, we sent all families at HLA, again, a lengthy memo on Monday night, this past Monday, the 10th. It contained a lot of information. If you have not received it for some reason, please contact us as soon as possible at info@hebrewpublic.org, and we'll make sure that you get an email with that memo and the link in it to a form for you to fill out. And you have until Monday the 17th to fill out that form. And in that form, you will be answering a number of questions. Most importantly, whether you'd like your child to participate in a fully remote model or a hybrid learning model for the first marking period, which the first quarter of the school year, which will take us through roughly mid-November. It's important that you make that choice, and part of what we're trying to do tonight is to give you enough information along with what's in that memo so that you have what you need to be able to make the choice that's right for your family, hybrid or remote. September 8th is going to be the first day of school for students. Again, we're starting the first 2 weeks fully remote. As you'll hear, the reasons we're doing that are to ensure that all of the work that we're doing in the HLA building around things like ventilation and airflow and filtration, that all is done, tested, fully ready to go. Secondly, that our staff are able to really train and practice all the health and safety procedures that they need to. Third, that you and your children are able to learn those same procedures and expectations remotely before we have to do them live and in person. And finally, that we can make sure that remote learning, which will happen for all children at least part of the week, is operating exactly as it's supposed to. That every family has a Chromebook, that internet access is working for everyone, that they're connected with their teachers and with school staff around remote learning, and that you as families are comfortable and operating well within that model. Our plan is that the week of September 21st, we would be welcoming back into the school building those children whose families have selected the hybrid model as their program of choice for the first marking quarter. Now, to give you a little bit of additional, maybe more than a little bit, a good amount of additional information about what these two different options are going to look like programmatically for your children, I'm going to hand it over to our Chief Schools Officer, Emily Fernandez. Emily?
Thank you, John, and thank you, Hadar. Good evening, families. As John noted, my name is Emily Fernandez. I am the Chief Schools Officer. I work very closely with the heads of schools of all of our Hebrew public schools, including Ms. Hadar, and also help design the long-term academic strategy for the network. So I'm going to start by giving us kind of a high-level understanding of our options, and then I'll be turning it over to our school-based leadership to do a deeper dive, because we know they are the ones who are going to be on the ground working with your children and you and partnering on a day-to-day basis. So we're really talking about two options for you to make a choice between. And the first is the hybrid learning model. As we noted in our July town hall, this is where students will come into the building for live instruction for 2 days out of the week. And so just to take us through a week, if you look at cohort A, our red group here, they have live in-person instruction on Mondays and Tuesdays. They come into the building. They'll have to follow a whole host of safety and health procedures, which we'll talk about tonight. They'll be in much smaller class sizes or pods of anywhere from 8 to maximum 15 in our very largest rooms. And they'll stay with that group of kids all day, socially distant, masks on, hand sanitizing, hand washing, all of these safety procedures, Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, they will be at home following a remote learning model. So Thursday and Friday, there's a clear schedule, which we're going to share a version of tonight, just a sample. Your exact schedule for your child will be shared later in the month to prepare you for coming into the building. But Thursday and Friday, they will have remote learning with other students from HLA. The same students who they were in the building with, they will be in remote learning with. And so that will be some small live synchronous instruction via Zoom, where their HLA teacher is doing a morning meeting with them, previewing their assignments and setting them up for the day. And then they'll move into asynchronous assignments and our online learning programs. And they'll also have, which I'll talk about in a moment, live synchronous Hebrew via Zoom on those days as well. On Wednesday, they will also have a combination of live synchronous instruction and asynchronous independent assignments and academic learning platforms. But it will be a slightly different schedule, as all of our students will be remote that day. Both our Monday, Tuesday live instruction in the building students and our Thursday, Friday live instruction in the building students will all be at home on Wednesdays, so that we are able to provide some live instruction to everyone, and then really do the deep preparation, planning, videotaping, and a whole host of things that's going to be required for our single staff to run these two programs. Next slide, please. So to talk a little bit more about our in-person days, as I noted, small groups to enable our social distancing, maximum 15, but really that's only for a few very large classrooms, because we've actually, our school leaders have measured classroom by classroom to space out desks in order to make a safe plan for children. Limited interaction between classrooms. So one pod of students is not going to be going to lunch or recess or assemblies with other pods. We're largely going to spend the day in a single room to avoid exposure to other students across the building. We know that, the least exposure that we have amongst children and staff, the safer we can be. And our goal is to be as safe as possible with the restrictions we have. There's going to be slightly shorter hours, and you'll see exactly what that means in a moment, to account for two things. One, arrival and dismissal is going to be much longer. It's going to be a bit tricky, right, to move anywhere from 40 or maximum 50% of our students into the building in a socially distant way. And we have been planning on that and really mapping it out. It's going to be complex, and we'll ask for your grace and your partnership, especially in those early days when we're teaching the children how to go through the whole process. but that's going to take up a bit of our instructional time. The other piece is our same teachers who are teaching students in the building will start their days with an 8 a.m. morning meeting for our remote students, for our students who are at home. And so in order, again, to run the two programs with the one amazing staff, it's going to be slightly shorter. As you'll see across all of our options, students with special needs, multi-language learners will be fully supported. We've been working extremely closely with the CSE Center for Special Education to vet our plans, to change our plans, to improve our plans, and make sure that we're supporting every child. And so we'll be monitoring that over the course of this time period and be in, constant communication with families around that as well. For our remote learning days, so these are the days when our red group was at home. Again, there'll be some live synchronous instruction, real time, via Zoom. There'll be significant asynchronous instruction, pre-taped lessons, assignments, and also some really neat educational learning platforms that we have, gotten pretty good at and really found some just innovative ways to access learning for kids, all of which are aligned with the programs we already had. So for example, Eureka is our math program, and so we are partnering now with Zern, which is an online learning platform, which complements it quite nicely. And there's a number of places like that you'll see. We will, of course, continue to support individual students. We'll continue to support families. We had some wonderful family workshops in the spring, and that's something we definitely want to maintain, and we're scheduling out what that could look like in the fall. Again, whether in person or remote, special education and multi-language learning plans will be implemented. And we are very committed to making sure that every family has the technology they need and has the internet access they need in order to access our program. It's clear that technology and technological access is educational access. So that's a commitment of ours as we move into another month where we are not in our traditional setting and we have to have a significant portion of our school remote. The one additional thing I'll note before I hand it over to our school team is about Hebrew. And so Hebrew has always been obviously core to our mission, and we're committed to providing live synchronous instruction in Hebrew and Israel studies on our remote learning days. So implementing Hebrew remotely will allow instructors to teach without masks. Right? If we taught Hebrew in the building, we'd have to have a mask on. We've researched the face shields, the clear face shields, and it's just not sufficient for a teacher walking around a classroom with a face shield and no mask. Although it would allow kids to see their mouth moving, it doesn't prevent the airflow from the mouth, and it's not safe. We would not be able to have that in classrooms. Doing it remotely, we are going to be able to have students see instructors' mouths, see the movement around words, all of that. And so we know that this is critical to language acquisition, and this is where we've decided to provide our Hebrew instruction remotely. We're also really excited to offer some, complementary enrichment activities in both Hebrew and Israel studies. For those of you who were able to participate in Camp Hebrew Public this summer, we did some really neat things, just like joyful enrichment, and we're going to continue to offer an enhanced version of that. You should look for that later this fall, hopefully in October. We'll be sharing out with families, totally optional, not in conflict with our school schedule, but a way to access more Hebrew and more Israel studies in a fun, engaging way. All right, with that, I want to turn it over to our school leaders to take you into a day in the life of what this will actually look like we'll start with an elementary school student.
Yes, thank you. What this looks like for the elementary student, when you're looking at the schedule, please keep in mind that this is just a sample schedule. Your student's schedule may be rearranged because we want to make sure that we can account for some outside time. We want students to keep distant from each other, and we want to make sure that the teachers that are interacting are limited to their pod. So when you think about this schedule, think about the components. Don't necessarily think about the order that they're coming in. So I'm going to turn it over to Daniela, who's going to walk you through the schedule.
Hi, good evening. So as Hadar said, I'm Daniela Steinberg. I'm really excited to step into this role as assistant head of school. I'm happy to be here tonight. So I'm going to walk you through a day in the life of one of our younger students in our K-4 part of the building. And they're the students that are part of our hybrid learning cohort on their in-school live instruction day. So those days that they're coming into school. So it starts out with our doors opening around 8:45. The reason for this delay is because that prior to 8:45, our teachers are going to be providing live synchronous instruction to our remote students who are back at home. Students and families would follow our arrival health and safety procedures. You will hear more about that later. That will include some things like temperature checks, symptom forms, and of course, staggered and socially distant entry into our building. At that point, the students will eat breakfast in their classrooms, and they're going to participate in some type of academic review and other activities while they're waiting for the rest of their peers to arrive over the course of about 45 minutes. After that, they would start their day. They would have a socially distant morning meeting, and then, of course, they would move into academic content. So for our returning families, you'll notice that much of these curricula look very familiar to you. We really worked very hard to keep what was strong about our program and improve our implementation while incorporating complementary learning technology that would best maximize this moment in time. So for example, our math program, Emily mentioned this earlier, we use Eureka. We are partnering that with Zern in the younger grades. In terms of literacy programs, we're going to keep those core components that we know make the difference in our growing leaders, such as foundations, guided reading, readers workshop, writers workshop, and we're going to partner those programs with Amplify. So by incorporating these complementary learning platforms into our in-person day, we're really hoping to make that transition between in-person and remote learning a lot more seamless for our students. Can you get the next slide, please? Great. Now we're just, sorry.
Go ahead.
We're going to shift gears a little bit to an at-home day for the same student, right? So the same student that was in school for those 2 days, we're just going to look at their day when they're at home. They're going to start their day with that same teacher who teaches them in person on those in-school days. And that teacher is going to lead them through a live remote morning meeting. And they're also going to give them a preview of their schedule and assignments for that day. We really believe that this will be a crucial part to maintaining that consistency that our kids really need, and setting both students and families up for success on those remote learning days. It also allows those students to maintain community with their peers. Even when they're not in the school building, they're still connected. After that, we'll move into a full schedule with a combination of a few things. So we'll have pre-recorded video lessons for kids to watch. We'll have online learning platforms, and then of course, we'll have independent work. So on many of the same curricular components that you saw at the in-school day, you're gonna see them here again, but they're a little bit different in their structure. We believe that if students are familiar with those components in all settings, they're really gonna be more successful at home in managing those programs and learning platforms. So they're using them at school, they become very familiar and comfortable, easier for it to work out at home. There's one significant difference between our in-school and at-home learning schedules, and you'll see those are the breaks. So we're gonna give breaks and longer lunches in that schedule when kids are at home. We all know that that extended screen time is really challenging for any age, including us, right? But we're really particularly concerned with those young learners. We want to make sure to build in those intentional breaks for our students and families. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Kevin, so he can talk about the middle school.
Thank you, Daniela, and good evening, HLA families. I'm excited to present our middle school schedule. And once again, what you see on the screen is only a sample of what your child's schedule could possibly look like. As our elementary school and our returning families will be familiar with our core curricular components, we will still continue with close reading, expeditionary learning, Eureka, partner with Zern, and so forth. It's important to note for the middle school specifically that our students will remain in their homerooms for most of the day to minimize transitions between themselves. Their teachers will actually rove between classrooms into their homerooms. And and there will be some transitioning possibly to PE for their special, but for the most of the day, the students will remain in their homeroom. And again, our goal is to prioritize key content for in-school instruction to ensure our students are maximizing their learning while in the building. Next slide, please. And so for our sample hybrid at-home day, you'll see a number of similarities with our younger grades schedule. Middle school students will start their day with their cohort teacher and advisory and daily preview of the day for consistency, connectedness, and academic organization. They will also have breaks and flex time built in to provide students and families with a way to manage the amount of screen time that we have. And that is one of our concerns. And we want to make sure that we note that we are paying attention to how much time they are in front of the screen. Also in the middle school, there'll be more independent work where appropriate to allow our students to actively engage in deep thinking independently and not just sitting in front of a screen, listening to a teacher and engaging via chat. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Hadar.
I am really excited to share something that we've been carefully planning and thinking about, and now able to fully confirm that every kindergarten student whose family wants him to attend the building and come into the building to learn will now be able to attend for 4 days of the week. So on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, students in kindergarten whose families choose the hybrid model, essentially saying that you want your children in the building, will not need to be in the hybrid model. They can come in for 4 days a week, and then on Wednesdays, they will have some remote instruction. So we are very excited to be able to share this. It was something that we were dreaming of because we know that for our youngest children, some of our kindergartners come in when they're 4 years old. Transitioning to school is when we really set up the foundation for developing good student habits and just understanding what school is all about. It's really hard to explain what school is all about when it's 1 day on, 1 day off, and it's your first time. So I'm happy to share that, and I'm going to transition it back to our Chief Schools Officer, Emily Fernandez, to take us through the fully remote day.
Thank you, Hadar. Yes, we are delighted that we're able to offer that for kindergarten through much planning and careful preparation and maximizing our school space. So the second option, if you do not want your students to come into the building at any point during this time period, you have the option to choose fully remote learning. So we're going to talk about what that's going to look like. What that means, though, as a headline, is that all 5 days of the week, your students are learning from home, and they are not coming into the school building at any point throughout the week. Effectively, as part of the fully remote learning option, your student will be part of 2 communities. One is their HLA community, in which they will join a cohort, the same as the red or blue cohort, and they will participate with that cohort's remote learning on that cohort's remote learning days. So, for example, a fully remote learning student who was assigned to cohort A, when cohort A is fully remote, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that student will be part of that. Will be in those morning meetings. Will have that Hebrew class with their HLA teacher, with their HLA friends, and have that connection to their school community. On the live instruction days, so again, thinking back to the red cohort that came into the building for live instruction on Monday and Tuesday, our fully remote students will also have live instruction. They will have live instruction in core content areas, English language arts or math, for a solid 3-hour block with a network remote academy teacher. And so basically what this means is all of the students from our 3 New York schools whose families select the fully remote option will become part of another community who have class together in small groups, no more than 25, likely slightly smaller, for 3 hours a day on the live instruction days in English language arts and math. Next slide, please. So here it is broken out again. 2 days of live instruction by our network remote academy teachers. These are teachers from all of our our 3 and actually 4, including Philly, if and when Philly goes this direction, teachers who are teaching students from all of our 3 New York City schools. 3 days of synchronous and asynchronous instruction on the remote days and aligned with in-person curriculum. Next slide. So we're going to hand it over. I want to note again that technology access will be implemented for every student who chooses the fully remote model. That special education, multi-language learners, all of that will be supported fully in the fully remote model, and they're going to have a chance to be part of these 2 communities. So they're still getting live instruction on live instruction days, and then they're participating with their HLA community on the remote days and still making that connection to their home school. I'll hand it over to our school leaders now.
Thank you, Emily. What I want to highlight here is that the students learning at home and the students learning at school are aligned in their curriculum. The curriculum for the live instruction days, whether they're in the building or the remote academy, are aligned, because we want to be able to bring back the children that are learning remotely at some point and be in sync with their classmates. So that is something that we are definitely aligning, not just with our digital platforms and our curriculum, but also between the days at home, the days with the remote academy teacher, and the days in person. And Daniela is going to walk you again through a schedule of a sample schedule of the remote only elementary kid.
Thanks, Hadar. So in this sample here, you'll see that in the remote academy, we include components such as morning meeting, we have literacy rotations, we have a Eureka math lesson, and those are all live instruction with their remote academy teacher. We'll go to the next slide. Now I want you to think about the other 3 days for a fully remote student, right? So during those days, we want to make sure that they still feel really connected with the HLA community. And for that reason, they'll be joining their cohort in remote instruction. Again, this is the same schedule that their counterparts from their school are going to be following on the days that they are remote. And as Emily noted earlier, the Wednesday schedule will be slightly different, and we'll share that out with you before school starts. I'm going to pass it over to Kevin.
All right, so I will be presenting our remote academy for our middle school. And as you can see on the screen, our remote academy students, it will combine both live and independent instruction, which are led by a network teacher that is assigned to each group of students across the network. We will continue with the morning meeting and all of our key curricular components that we have during our in-person model. This also means that our middle school students who are in the remote academy will have a chance to be with their HLA friends who may also be in the remote academy, and middle school students from our other middle school in Harlem. This is something that we are excited about, as the 2 schools of students will get a chance to interact, whereas this typically wouldn't happen. And once again, you will see that there are breaks built in. We believe that the schedule will ensure that our middle school students are able to manage their time successfully, develop strong study habits, and complete their work as expected. We know that middle school students will need our support to accomplish this, and we will give them the support to do so as they become more independent throughout the year. Next slide, please. Similar to the elementary students, our middle school students will begin the morning in their homeroom, teacher and advisory. We learned that in the spring, having a set time with the teacher set them up for success. We elected to have advisory at regular school hours to ensure that students are awake and ready to go, which is really, really, really important, and receive instruction to prepare them for the remainder of their day. There's independent work to promote independent deep thinking for our students once again. And also, as you can see, there will be a schedule that combines both live and independent instruction to keep the rigorous pacing we believe will support students maintain a consistent schedule while at home. Once again, there are breaks built in to provide students and families with that time away from the screen, because that is something that we cannot stress enough of. And it's something I think Daniela mentioned earlier that we even struggle with from time to time. And so we're excited about this schedule, and I'm excited to now pass it back to our CSO, Emily Fernandez.
Thank you, Kevin. I love the aspect you highlighted there about our middle school students becoming more independent and doing that deep thinking. And we're mindful of wanting to make sure that all of our kids of every age continue to progress academically during this time. And so we're hopeful that our structures and schedules allow us to do that. Next slide, please. So I want to just summarize this academic programming portion one more time before we shift into a critical topic around health and safety. We're reopening with a hybrid model. You have to make the choice for your student and what makes sense for your family. Two options. One is the blended model, where it's 2 days in the building for live in-person instruction and 3 days remotely, synchronous and asynchronous instruction at home. Or fully remote, 5 days at home, still getting live instruction on live instruction days from a network remote academy teacher. Remember, across both models, the curricular components are aligned, the assessments are aligned, and the grading will continue to be aligned as well. Some important information that's coming your way. Friday, tomorrow, we'll be sharing the school year calendar, so you can begin to wrap your head around beyond just the next few weeks. You know, we'll name this in the memo that goes out, but I'll name it again here, that calendar is very much so likely to change. As things change on the ground, as we evaluate what's happening at school, we might have to make changes, and we'll ask for your understanding, partnership, and flexibility there. But regardless, we want to get you our plan as it is now, so you can begin to plan ahead, even if we know some things might be uncertain. On Monday, August 17th, we'll ask that you submit your hybrid versus fully remote form and make your final selection. It is critical that we have that on Monday. There is a significant amount of planning that has to happen after that to move and juggle all the puzzle pieces, individual children, make rosters, staffing assignments. And so we need that information from you promptly on Monday, August 17th. August 31st, cohort assignments will be shared with those families who select the hybrid in-person model. That's highlighted because this is an adjustment from what we shared in July. In July, we had hoped to be sharing the cohort assignments as early as August 24th. And unfortunately, as we've gotten deeper into planning and navigated certain changes, and in response to guidance we've gotten, we had to push that back a week. So you'll get your cohort assignments of which classes you're in, which days you're coming in, should you choose to send your child into school on August 31st. The great thing is that is still significantly, a few weeks away from when they actually have to come into the building for the first day on September 21st. But it is a slight delay. September 8th, as John noted, will be the first day of school. It will all be virtual. All of our children will be remote those first 2 weeks, so we can build a community, teach our remote learning platform structure, and teach the safety procedures that kids are going to need to know, families are going to need to know and support before they come to the school building and have to do it in real time. Okay, I'll give it back to Hadar to just transition us to the next section.
Okay, thank you. And I want to point out something that we didn't mention, and that is that the academy teachers are our teachers. They're not some teachers from the outside. They are either HLA teachers or they're network teachers from our sister schools. So these are all people that we already love and we've vetted, and our children may end up with an HLA teacher being their academy teacher. So our top priority is health and safety. And we know that in our ideal world, we will return to school full days, every day, every week. And we also know that our staff and students' health and safety is extremely important. We're doing everything within our power to ensure that our return to school plans are made with thoughtfulness and care. We miss your children so much. And as much as we miss them, we want them to be safe, and that comes first. School is going to be different. It's going to feel different. It's going to take time to adjust for all of us. And yet we have to insist on strict guidelines and to ensure that those who are choosing the hybrid model, that being at school will be safe. Our hashtag, HLA Together, is because we need you to partner with us in this. As a mom, I can appreciate the awesome dilemma of choosing to keep my kids home or sending my kids to school. You're entrusting your children with us. We want to ease your mind with this information and with all the updates as they come up. And with that, I'm going to hand it to Jonathan Worley, our Chief Operating Officer, who's going to do a deeper dive into the specifics of the health and safety plan, since his team and him have been working for many, many, many hours over the last 5 months.
Great. Thank you so much, Hadar. Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan Worley. I'm really happy to be here with you tonight, and I appreciate everyone coming out and the good turnout. As Hadar said, I'm going to speak a little bit about our preparation for our health and safety preparation for when we open schools to your children. As Hadar mentioned, the health and safety of our staff and our students are our absolute top priority this year. And I can tell you that I am personally committed, and our network operations team and the leadership team at your school and the operations team at your school are fully committed to reopening our schools with the best possible practices in place that we can, and in order to ensure the safest school environment possible. And to make sure that we are getting there, we have been spending months now carefully following federal, state, and local guidelines. That includes taking guidance from the CDC, the Departments of Health, the local school district. We've also been paying attention to best research, talking about best practices with peer networks, bringing in experts on various health and safety subjects. And then finally, listening to the needs of our families and of our staff. And to that end, with all that input, we have framed all of our health and safety thinking around what we're calling our set of guiding principles. I'm going to walk us through these principles, the foundation of the planning we're doing, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how are we putting these principles into action when your students come to the school, and how we're going to be prepared from a health and safety perspective. So a lot of these concepts are going to be really familiar, hopefully. Social distancing is the first one. So social distancing, this is something that should be familiar for anyone who's set foot in a grocery store recently, for example. Use of personal protective equipment, or PPE. This refers to masks, gloves, any other kind of equipment aimed at personal protection and hygiene. Health screening, of course, with a focus on coronavirus. Cleaning and disinfection, I'm going to speak a little bit about how we're upping our efforts there. Environmental management, which is a very important one. This has to do with air quality, air ventilation, and I'll speak about where we're moving in that area. And then finally, batching or podding, and you already heard a bit about that, so I'm not going to touch on that here, but that's the podding of our students in classrooms. All right, we can move to the next slide. So I'm going to go into, again, a little bit of detail on just some of the highlights of the measures that we're taking, based on those fundamental guiding principles. So starting with social distancing. Again, this should be pretty familiar guideline, as we have all probably seen this as we set foot out of our houses. But we're going to be requiring 6 foot of separation for everyone in the building at all times. And we're going to be doing this with a focus on the outside the building as people wait to come in the hallways, in our lobbies, in our main office, and in the classroom. And in fact, we'll be setting up our classrooms to maintain this at all times. So we have our desks separated at least 6 feet. We'll have space for adults in the room, teachers, to be able to operate with 6 feet of distance at all times. In addition, we are going to be structuring our transitions, like arrivals and dismissals, in ways that will allow us to best maintain social distancing, and that means most obviously some staggering to our arrival and dismissals, and those processes and the structure of that we're going to be sharing with families as soon as we have it all settled down. And then finally, just to reinforce all of this, there's going to be signage everywhere. We have posters that are going to be going up, reminding people of social distancing, saying this is how far you should be apart, and we're going to be putting floor stickers around to help with flow in the hallways, so people aren't crossing in the halls, and to again encourage distancing for individuals. Shifting over to PPE, or personal protective equipment, this is one that's one of the most important defenses that we can do, but it's also a mandate, state mandate for us. everyone who enters the building is going to be expected to wear a face mask at all times. That means students, that means staff, vendors, visitors, families. The general expectation is that folks will arrive at school with a mask, including our students. However, if on a given day someone forgets their mask, they lost it on the way, it ripped, whatever it is, the office will have extra inventory on hand, and so we'll have disposable masks for students. And there'll be plenty of other PPE inventory, like gloves, cleaning supplies, things like that. In addition, every room in the building is going to receive what we're calling a hygiene kit. And the hygiene kits are going to contain PPE. So every teacher in every classroom will have a kit with rubber gloves where they'll be expected to use those if there's going to be handling anything that'll be transferred to a student, cleaning supplies, things like that. In addition, another bit of PPE is hand sanitizer, and we are going to have hand sanitizer stations set up throughout the entire building with a focus on transition points. So there'll be hand sanitizer stations by the front doors, near bathroom entrances, and in every classroom. And we'll have a general expectation for staff and students that when we transition between spaces, there will be hand cleaning, either washing or sanitization. All right, I'm going to shift over to screening now. And health screening we're taking a 3-tiered approach kind of to health screening. And the first has to do with testing for COVID. We are requiring all of our staff to be tested for COVID prior to our first day of live instruction. And we anticipate having results for everyone prior to that first day of live instruction. In addition, for every day of live instruction and every day that we have staff in the building and students in the building, all staff and students will be required to answer symptom screening questions on a daily basis. And we are going to be providing information about how exactly that's going to happen, but we will have notification probably via text or email, and a very simple process that doesn't require any app downloads or anything like that for parents and guardians and staff to quickly enter answers to just a few symptom screening questions. Things like, is your child displaying any of these symptoms? Have they been exposed to anyone who has tested positive for COVID in the last 24 hours? Things like that. And then finally, we'll be doing temperature checks for everyone who enters the building. These will be no contacts done with infrared thermometers. This is everyone. This is staff. This is vendors. This is all students as well. And if anyone registers a temperature of 100.0 degrees or over, as per DOH recommendations, we will be asking them to not enter the building. Of course, if it's a student who's on site and doesn't have a guardian to take them at that point, they'll be referred to the nurse, and we will call parents for pickup. I am going to shift now to cleaning. Again, we are going to be upping our efforts in cleaning. We have staff on site, of course, cleaning staff on site all day, all the time. We are going to be, that team will be having a stronger focus on high touch and high traffic areas with a focus on disinfection as well. We've also purchased additional new disinfection equipment. And we'll be increasing our evening staff. So every evening we are going to be able to disinfect every room in the building, every surface in every classroom will be disinfected every night. And so you can have confidence that when your students enter, when your children enter a classroom, it has been cleaned the night before. Of course, when we are in the hybrid model, the Wednesday day when the students are not in the building will provide us more opportunity to have a more hands-on focus on cleaning on those days as well. And then finally, we're going to ask staff and students to participate a bit in this and to assist with wiping down surfaces, particularly after meals, and the hygiene kits will have the supplies for that. All right, finally, I want to talk just for a moment about environmental management. This is actually one of the most important things we can do for safety and health, and that is to focus on airflow, air ventilation, sourcing fresh air whenever possible in the building. And so we've been doing a lot of work on this, doing a lot of research and working with a lot of experts on this. And so we brought in engineers to review our systems in the building. And the really good news is that our HVAC, our cooling and heating systems are working really well, and we are in good shape. The even better news is there are ways for us to make it even better for preventing virus spread. So we're going to be taking all the advice of the engineers in order to do that. That means some calibration changes, making sure the right humidity levels are set. In addition, we are very likely to be purchasing some additional air sanitation equipment that will be attached to that system to not just help. So not only will we have good airflow, air coming in from the outside, but we will be cleaning the air if we set this equipment up, and we are very likely to be doing that. And then finally, another really great way to make sure that we have good airflow and we have good fresh outside air is we're going to encourage classroom windows to be open at all times whenever possible. Of course, serious inclement weather would make that impossible, but having open windows in the classrooms are really a good step to having good airflow in the space. All right, can we move to the next slide? All right, and I just really want to quickly address kind of one of the questions that comes up a lot and that we're hearing a lot, and that is what's going to happen if someone in our community tests positive for COVID. And the answer is somewhat simple, and of course the reality is going to be somewhat complex, but the answer really is we are going to do exactly what we are mandated to do by the protocols of state and local health departments. And so at this time, and as these are updated, we will adjust our practices to how they're updated. But at this time, that means immediate notification to the City Department of Health that we've been notified of a positive case. And this is, again, staff, students, anyone part of our community. And we will immediately comply with their directives, and they will give us guidance on what has to happen in the school. What we know now is that this may include temporarily shifting some of our students to remote learning, potentially an entire classroom to remote learning, and if there's a greater outbreak, it may even mean temporarily or for a period of time, shifting the entire school to remote learning. And we're going to be prepared to do that. Again, we are going to be taking guidance from the agencies that have oversight of this. Of course, if something like this comes up in our school, we will certainly communicate as well as possible with families about this. Of course, recognizing that there are confidentiality issues around these things, but if there is an outbreak, we will certainly communicate quickly and accurately about this with families. All right, and so with that, I am going to transition this back to John Rosenberg. Thanks.
Thanks, Jonathan, for giving such a thorough overview around health and safety. And I want to emphasize something here, because I know that there are a variety of opinions in every community about how seriously to take this pandemic and about whether things like mask wearing are necessary. We are not just making this stuff up. This is really important that all families be in partnership with us here, that children and families take this as seriously as we are and as seriously as health officials are. This is a very serious pandemic. We're taking all of these health and safety measures to maximize the chance of, to minimize the chance of any kind of outbreak in the school. Nothing we do is going to be foolproof, but we increase the chances of safety if everyone follows these new procedures. We wish this weren't the case. We wish we were in a different kind of year going into this first marking quarter, but this is where we all find ourselves. And the requirements we're putting in place are not just our choices. These are what's required by the Department of Health and by the New York State Education Department through orders issued by the governor of New York State and consistent with all of the expert recommendations that are being made. So we need to follow those rules. It's the right thing to do, and we really need you guys as partners in doing that. If for any reason a family is not willing to meet those requirements in terms of supporting what their child does, please just choose the remote option. We totally understand that. Choose the fully remote option, and you can support the whole community in so doing. Want to remind you, we really need you by Monday, August 17th, this coming Monday, to make a choice of hybrid or remote. That choice is only for the first marking quarter. You'll be able to make a new choice if we're still in the middle of this pandemic, if we're not all back at school by the end of that quarter, back to normal, you will be able to make a new choice for the second quarter. In addition, if you try out the hybrid model, the model where kindergartners will be in 4 days a week, other grades in 2 days a week, and you decide, or your child decides that they're uncomfortable with it, you decide that it's not working out for you, you can switch to fully remote during the marking quarter. You don't need to wait to the end. We're not going to force anyone to send their child to the school building if they're uncomfortable doing so after having started out with it. We cannot accommodate movement the other way. There may be some extraordinary circumstances where we might make an exception if somebody's life circumstances have changed dramatically. But we have to make sure that we're maintaining safe environments and groupings of kids, that we're maintaining the right kinds of classroom sizes for each group of children, and that we're making sure that all kinds of special education services and other customized services for children are in place. And we can't do that if there's constant movement back and forth, and if children are moving from remote to hybrid. So we ask your understanding in advance around that. Let's talk about two other things that we know are very much on the minds of many of our families. First, bus service. I wish I could tell you with clarity what's going on with buses. Our charter school is not responsible for bus service, unfortunately, in this moment, because I think we're doing a really good job on the things we are responsible for. Unfortunately, the responsibility for bus transportation sits with the city's Office of Pupil Transportation. And the city has not even made clear to district schools when and how buses will run. There's been no guidance given as to the timing when buses will start. We do know that when the city starts buses, there will be rules in place similar to the rules in schools. Windows open on buses where they can be, mask wearing required for all children, and far fewer children on a given bus in order to maintain social distancing. But what that's going to look like in terms of whether there will be additional buses or even what day bus service will start, we just don't know yet. And you'd get the same answer if you were talking to a local district school. They also don't know. So again, I wish we could give you more information about that. As soon as we learn more, and we're always pushing to get more information, we will let you know. In the interim, if you sign up for hybrid because that's what you want, and for some reason bus service hasn't started yet, we will of course understand if you need to switch to remote. And the city has said that they will provide Metro cards. That's not going to work for many families. It's not going to work for younger kids who can't take the subway alone. But we will certainly do what we can to try to put families in touch with each other. In some cases, families with windows open and masks on may be able to carpool. There are all sorts of creative ways we can think about those issues together, but we just don't have control over the city's provision of bus services. Secondly, we are very much aware, and this is an issue that applies to some of our own staff, that by not providing in-person schooling 5 days a week, for many of the families that we serve, and many of you on this call tonight, you have a childcare issue that comes out of that. Where does your child go on the maybe as many as 3 days a week that they're not going to be in our school building for this period of weeks? We hope it won't be too many weeks. If you have to go to a place of work, and if there's no other responsible adult who can be in your house. So a couple of things about this. First, the mayor announced about a month ago that the city intends to create 100,000 childcare slots for school-age children around the city. Again, I wish I could tell you I felt more optimistic about the city's ability to deliver on that. The program doesn't exist yet. The locations have not been announced. The decisions around who gets to be in them, how you apply, none of that has been announced yet. And so we hope it'll happen. And if it does happen, we will connect you to all the information you might need to be an applicant, hopefully a successful applicant for one of those slots. But we haven't stopped there. We're also trying to build our own child care partnerships with local organizations in Brooklyn that might be able to provide some relief to you if you're in a situation where you or a spouse or another adult member of your household has to go to work and there's no one available to watch your child. In particular for HLA, we're very close to finalizing a partnership with the Kings Bay Y to serve a number of both the small number of staff members in our schools so that they can actually be in school to serve your children and as many children in our HLA community as possible. In designing that program with Kings Bay, we're going to ensure that for as many families as can be served, that there will be Wi-Fi that children will be able to bring their Chromebooks with them and engage in the remote learning program. Now, I wish I could tell you that program is going to be free. It won't be. These programs, even though Kings Bay is a nonprofit, these programs cost money and they have to cover their costs in running them. We are doing everything we can to raise additional money to provide scholarship support for working families that have the highest level of need. We don't have all the details on that yet. We're still working on it. But as soon as we get this stuff in place, we're going to be connecting you with information about it. And you'll note if you've filled out the form that's due Monday, or when you turn to fill it out in the coming days, that we ask you whether childcare is a need of yours if you're taking the hybrid model option. And if so, we're going to do everything we can to connect you with choices. Next slide, please. So those are some of the things that we're working on. And let me also add, because I see a question just came in on this, and it is quite pertinent to this childcare issue. Any childcare provider that we work with is going to follow a very similar set of protocols to what our school is following around social distancing, around enforced mask wearing, around having kids in batches as much as possible. And so we can't 100% guarantee safety in those programs any more than we can guarantee 100% safety in our school setting. There are too many variables involved in that, but we are only looking to partner with programs that really know what they're doing, and that, for example, like Kings Bay, have been operating childcare programs for school-age kids or summer camp programs in the weeks leading up to the restart of the school year. In terms of our school, as my colleague Jonathan mentioned, we may face a situation where one or more staff members or children test positive in a way that leads to either partial school closure and self-quarantine for a number of children and staff, or in a more expansive situation, maybe even the entire closure of our school for a couple of weeks. In addition, if the health conditions on the ground in New York City change, and you may remember earlier in tonight's presentation, and I know it's a lot of information, but bear with us, we want to really equip you guys to make choices. We talked about the fact that the governor said if the infection rate, the positive test rate increases, then all schools in the city will be ordered to close, not something we have control about. There are experts who are predicting that there might be a viral surge in October or November. We are not going to use that at HLA as an excuse not to open. We're going to open as best we can, as soon as we can, again, targeting the week of September 21st, but we may find ourselves a month later where the whole city has to close down. And we just want you to know that all of those things are part of the new reality of uncertainty we live in. But on a more positive note, this crazy period we're in will end, right? At some point, there are 170 plus vaccines in development. The virus will spread and eventually dissipate. We will reach a point, and hopefully it will be much sooner than later. And hopefully it'll be in the early part of the school year or in the mid part of the school year, and not have to take a whole school year of this very challenging scenario with all of these different program choices and options and constraints. Hopefully we will all be back to normal and your children will be in school 5 days a week. And that will happen eventually. We can all just hope and pray that it happens sooner than later. Now I'm going to hand it back to Emily Fernandez to walk us through some additional frequently asked questions that we might not have covered so far in our presentation tonight. And again, I want to reiterate, if we didn't get to your question in the chat, if we didn't get to the question that you're thinking about on the phone and don't have an opportunity to ask, just email us at info@hebrewpublic.org. We do commit to getting back to you, either with a follow-up FAQ, frequently asked questions document for the whole community, or something specifically targeted for you in an email right back to you to respond to your question. Emily.
All right, thank you so much, John. So again, this is going to be a frequently asked question portion where some of the questions have been coming in already via email, a number of the ones that are in the chat. We've compiled them and we're going to attempt to provide answers so that you can just start to wrap your head around it. Next slide, please. Also, as John noted, questions can be sent in real time to the panel through the Zoom chat. And if we do not answer it tonight in our verbal presentation, we will surely follow up with you either directly or as part of a follow-up message to the full family community. So, how many children will be allowed in the school building and how many adults will be allowed in a classroom? We touched on this earlier, this idea of social distancing and podding. And so Classroom maximum occupancy will be based on the space in a classroom, ranging from 8 students in our smallest classrooms all the way to 15 in our few large ones, the large ones that we have that we can do that in. It's all around designing desks being spaced out fully to allow for social distancing, creating space for teachers to stand and circulate and still allow for social distancing. And so we don't expect to have at any given point more than 40, maximum 50%, but that would really be unlikely, of our student body in the building at a given time. In terms of adults coming into classrooms, we are really restricting classroom access to the adults who are relevant to that classroom. So the teachers who teach in that classroom will be in that classroom. The school leadership who supports those teachers in that classroom, they will be in those classrooms. However, a first grade teacher will not be going to a 6th grade classroom to visit her old students and say hello to her colleague. Unfortunately, while that's a beautiful sense of community that we have at HLA, we will not be able to do that. And we're training our staff really tightly on these protocols in the coming weeks so that when we do open the doors, it's clear that an adult who comes into a classroom is only there if they meet certain criteria. The last thing I'll say on this is that for the adults who do come into a classroom, they're going to follow a very strict protocol. We'll have hand sanitizers in every classroom. You walk in, sanitize your hands. There's going to be strict guidance around maintaining social distance from children and staff while you're in the classroom, handling what you need to handle, prepare to leave, hand sanitize again, and exit the classroom. Full mask and PPE the full time. So we're really trying to limit exposure as much as possible. Next slide. So John spoke to this a bit, but we know that mask wearing is mandatory, that social distancing is mandatory in this new world. And we have done a lot of thinking and planning about this already. We have significant pages full of routines and procedures, and we are training our teachers in the next 3.5 weeks these concrete routines and procedures so they can train and teach our children. It is possible, and we will do it. And I shared with another group that, I have a son, my 4-year-old, he recently enrolled in a local day camp in Brooklyn. He was not familiar with wearing a mask for more than maybe 20 minutes at a time. And after the first day, we had to remind him to take it off when he came home. For those of you who know Fahan, he is an energetic little munchkin. So I'm confident if he can adapt that, adapt to those circumstances, that we can with our children. And we're going to be very consistent on this. Absolutely every child, every staff member must wear a mask at all times other than eating or drinking. We're also going to partner heavily with families. You know your child best. And so we know that if you are choosing the in-person option, you are choosing for your child to wear a mask. And so we'll be in constant communication, and you should expect that that will be part of the partnership if you choose that option, so we can keep everyone as safe as we possibly can. So I'll start on this, but then I want to turn it over to Hadar, because I'm actually quite excited about our leadership team and the plans we have for culture support this year. So we're aware that all of us have experienced a form of trauma in these past 5-6 months, of social isolation, of distancing, of lack of interaction and academic support. And there's a body of work coming out about the effects of that on children. And so we're trying to ground our thinking, even as we're just beginning to learn about it, just beginning to understand how to support children and staff who are experiencing this. But we're grounding our thinking in trauma responsive practices, while continuing to lean very heavily on responsive classroom. We know that we can communicate and execute high expectations for children in a loving, socially, emotionally aware way that allows them to be successful. We also have a pretty great team of folks at HLA this year, and at the division of the elementary school and the middle school allows for a little more specialization. And so I'll let Hadar talk about her folks, her leaders, but between our deans that we have there, our social worker and counselor, and our assistant heads of schools, as well as a culture associate that we've added in. I'm doing it, Hadar. I'll hand it over to you because I'm excited for the team that's going to be leading culture this year. Oh, Hadar, come off.
Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah.
We're excited about the same point. So the culture associate was definitely something that was on my mind. I want to talk just for a minute about trauma responsive practices, because one of the things that we are learning is that this collective trauma that we are all going through is impacting everybody, and it's impacting everyone a little bit differently, because for many of our students, many of our staff, we already have some trauma in our past or trauma in our present, and this is compounding on top of it. So we are approaching this school year with the assumption and the understanding that everyone experienced trauma. And we've done significant amount of training this summer to prepare ourselves. And what we are learning is that there is two ways to really approach this. One is build really strong relationships, and two, learn to self-regulate, mindfulness, taking time, identifying our triggers and responding to them. So we are doing a lot of work with our faculty and our leadership and our student support team to address those needs. We want students to be able to recognize what they need, and we'll teach them the skills. The motto is kids do well if they can. If they don't, it means they can't. And the same way that we help a child learn how to read if they don't know how to read, we want to help children develop the skills that they might be lagging. So we are approaching this school year with the understanding that the most important thing is to feel really good. And when you feel good, then you're open to learning. And that's where we're putting our focus.
Thank you. And that's just a beautiful way of putting it, Hadar. And I think that we all know from this time period that safety and emotional well-being is the foundation to be able to do anything else. And so it's been a big focus for us. And to a question that came in the chat around, will we be supporting our remote learners with trauma-informed practices as well? Absolutely. All of our staff, all of our network staff are actually engaging in this process of beginning to become informed about best practices to respond to trauma.
Yes.
Next slide, please. So we certainly wish that we could provide more live instruction in remote days. And in the event that we unfortunately would have to close at any point, we will shift to a fully remote schedule across the full school that will increase the amount of live instruction we can provide all students at home. While we are running the hybrid model, we simply do not have enough staff to provide live instruction throughout the full day for both the students who are in the building and the students who are at home. And so we're absolutely delighted that we were able to create a schedule with a morning meeting touch point that organizes your day, that connects you to your peers, that Hebrew is going to be live and connecting at home. And we're still exploring options. You know, we might be able to innovate in a couple of months, but hopefully we'll be back in the building. But we simply are not able to do that at this point, and we are making every effort to make the schedule as robust as possible.
Yes.
So kindergarten, and Hadar, I know you've been walking the building and planning space and figuring everything out. So I'll start this off
to talk about it.
Right. We are able to maximize our space to afford kindergarten in the building 4 days a week. They will still be socially distanced. So there will be, instead of 2 classes, there will be 4 classes spread out for the children who opt to come in. We simply do not have the space in order to do that for more than 1 grade. And we targeted kindergarten because, as Hadar named earlier, they are our youngest children. They are learning what it is to come to school. And additionally, there's been a good amount of data out in the last 2 months about the impact of remote learning by age group. And unsurprisingly, our youngest learners are having the worst impact on their academic progress. Our older students, our high schoolers, our upper middle schoolers are able to keep on track more independently, right? They're more mature, they can self-regulate more, but we know that our youngest students, it's impacting them the most. And so we wish we could do this for everyone. We can't, space-wise, staff capacity. And so the fact that we were able to do it for kindergarten is where we landed. Hadar?
Yes, and I will say that we are really excited that we had a room on the same floor as the rest of our kindergarten classes. So by shifting our music room, one of the music rooms is going to become a kindergarten room, and now we will have 4 rooms set up, and we had just finished hiring the last missing teacher for our kindergarten class. So our kindergartners are still going to have 4 days. They're going to have 1 day at home. And we hope to have a really positive first year of school experience for them.
Wonderful. All right, next slide. So throughout the day, we have hand sanitizing across the whole building, and we'll be encouraging staff to hand sanitize, to wash hands as frequently as possible. We also will be doing so with students, of course, hand sanitizing, but also having some structured times where we have teachers work with their class to wash hands specifically, particularly, again, for our youngest students who we know get their hands into everything. And also we have classroom bathrooms that will be offering that as frequently as possible. Next slide. John, I'd love you to jump in here and just share again.
Sure thing. Yes, I just want to reiterate, folks, I'll keep it super short because I've really covered this, but just to remind you, if you think you're going to need childcare help and you're choosing the hybrid model on the days when your child won't be in school, if you're a parent of a kindergartner or guardian of a kindergartner, that would mean on Wednesdays you might need help. And if you're going to be in the hybrid model, it would mean in the other grades, it would mean the other 3 days. Let us know on that form, and we'll do everything that we can to connect you with a program. And if your family has significant financial need, we'll do everything we can to help support that program with the scholarship dollars that we're trying to raise. Again, we're also hoping the city will be able to launch its program that would provide free childcare. And obviously, as soon as we hear more about that program, if the city succeeds in launching it, we will get that information in your hands.
Next slide. So grading, you saw earlier, our curricular components are going to be aligned whether our students in the hybrid model or the fully remote model. And so that goes for assessments and grading as well. We are exploring both traditional forms of assessment, be them written or submitted via our learning platform, but also innovative ways. So what online assessments can we incorporate for both our fully remote and our hybrid students so that we can maximize the online learning programs? Regardless, we know that families care deeply about their students' academic progress and don't want this year or this spring to be something that holds them back from what comes next for them. And so family communication is going to be critical. We're already thinking through virtual back to school nights, virtual family conferences, along with just the general communication between a family and a teacher that we know is crucial to the long-term partnership. Next slide. Arrival and dismissal. We've talked about this a bit, so I don't know that we need to go deep into it. The one thing I'll name is that, again, it will be complicated, it will be longer than usual, and we are going to need families to partner with us in it. And so as you get your cohort schedules and as we're doing our 2 weeks of remote learning to start the year, we'll go into deeper detail of what it looks like to enter the building, what a no contact temperature check looks like, where the station will be, how we'll space out, all of that. But what we need to know, we need to share now is just that it's not going to be business as usual, and we're going to need your partnership as we keep everyone as safe as we possibly can. I also want to note that, we will not be able to have families coming into the building as we have in previous years. We really have been guided and really given pretty clear restrictions that only absolutely necessary visitors can enter the building. Of course, if a student was in medical distress, or we were in some situation like that, we would look to, that would be considered a mandatory exception. But we've been able to have a really open door, welcoming environment where families are able to come in and connect with each other and connect with teachers. And unfortunately, the restrictions are that other than mandatory folks, staff, vendors, for example, the folks who are coming in to check our air condition and redo the HVAC system that Jonathan talked about, other than those individuals, we are not able to allow additional adults into the building on a casual or frequent basis. So I do just want to name that because it's an item for to register. That's another difference in this year of differences. Mm-hmm. Next slide, please. So I got ahead of myself a bit and named the points from this slide, so I won't reiterate it here. But I will say that the few individuals that are allowed entry into the building will have to comply by the full safety procedures, wear a mask at all times, have a no contact temperature check, and also do a health screening form prior to entry. Okay, so I want to give it back to Hadar to just kind of close us out. I'll say thank you from me, to have such a great turnout on a Thursday night and stick with us to the end. I'm really grateful, and I know the commitment the HLA community has for its school. So Hadar, back to you.
Thank you. I just want to remind everyone that if you still have questions, or if your questions weren't answered, to please email info@hebrewpublic.org. We will answer all of the questions. And you have a tough choice ahead of you. I hope that you feel that you got enough information tonight to be able to make a good selection for your family. And if you choose the hybrid model, you are agreeing to follow the rules that we are putting in place. That means that we are wearing masks. That means that we are going to ask for your patience and understanding when arrival and dismissal are going to take a little longer until we get in the groove of it, but we are going to keep social distancing. We're going to keep everyone safe. And I want to just quickly put in a plug that on Tuesday, our K4 Assistant Head of School, Daniela, and our new Dean of Culture, Cadiado Rodrigo, are going to have a meet and greet for K4 families. And you should have gotten the invitation, and we will post it on Facebook as well. So please reach out to any one of us with any questions. We are here for you. We're in this together, HLA together. We can't do this alone. We really need your partnership, and we're here for you. Thank you so much for coming.